If you ask me, every season is soup season. But now with the days getting shorter and the nights getting colder, I count on soup more than ever to stay warm and to ward off the winter blues. Today, I'm super excited to share 5 nourishing soup recipes that I've been loving lately. And hopefully this inspires you to cook up some coziness this week too. We're gonna kick this video off with my Marry Me chickpea and orzo soup. This is a riff on the viral Marry Me chicken, and I've made Marry Me tofu, which is a skillet dish. But today we're gonna turn it into a soup. We're gonna use some beans instead of tofu, and I'm also gonna add some pasta to make it a little bit more hearty. I think this soup would make a great weeknight dinner because there actually isn't too much prep work involved, so it comes together pretty quickly and also in one pot. Dice up an onion and mince up as much garlic as you like. You can also add celery and carrot to this if you want to bulk it up with more veggies, but it isn't required. I'm also removing the stalks from a bunch of Tuscan kale. You can also use baby kale if you want to cut down on the prep work, or you can use spinach. Then lastly, go ahead and measure out your sun-dried tomatoes and give those a coarse chop. I'm using the kind that come packed in oil, but if you are buying the dehydrated kind, just go ahead and rehydrate them in some boiling water for a few minutes so they soften up, and then chop them. You can also use some of this flavored oil to saute your veggies for the soup if you like. I'm heating my pan over medium, adding some olive oil, and sauteing my onions with a couple of shakes of red pepper flakes, but then I remembered I have Calabrian chili paste in the fridge, so I also added some of that. This stuff is really delicious. After the onions are translucent, I'm adding the garlic and the sun-dried tomatoes and sauteing for just another minute till the garlic is very fragrant. Now I'm adding in tomato paste, breaking that up with my spoon to coat my aromatics, and then cooking that for a few minutes till it goes from that bright red color to a deeper kind of rusty color. I'm using chickpeas in this soup today, but I think it would also be delicious made with white beans or butter beans. You could also substitute in some plant-based chicken or the Italian sausage from Beyond, but if you're using the sausage, I would recommend browning it first and then setting it aside and adding it back in at the end. Pouring in 6 cups of vegetable broth, and then I'm adding 1 teaspoon of Italian seasoning. You can also season with some salt here, depending on how salty your vegetable broth is. Once this comes up to a boil, I'm stirring in my pasta. I'm using orzo, but any small pasta shape would work. I like to simmer this till the pasta is about halfway cooked, like it's getting tender on the outside but still has a lot of chew in the middle, and that's when I'll add my kale. A lot of soup recipes will have you just stir the kale in at the end, but personally I like mine to cook for several minutes to tenderize it, but this kind of comes down to personal preference. Once the pasta is al dente and the kale is wilted, I'm adding in a few finishing touches, some grated vegan Parmesan, some full-fat coconut milk from a can to make it creamy. You could also substitute in some homemade cashew cream or another store-bought cream. And then I'm adding in some fresh chopped basil. And now our Marry Me chickpea soup is ready to serve. By the way, what do you think about this trend of Marry Me recipes? I know the corny names bother some people because they aren't descriptive. I guess recipes with this flavor profile are often called like Tuscan soup or Tuscan chicken, at least in the United States. But I'm not sure if that's technically accurate either. If you're from Tuscany, maybe you can share your thoughts on this. Either way, if you're a lover of tomatoes, basil, garlic, Parmesan, and cream, I think you will love this soup. At this point, it's kind of become a yearly tradition on the channel to do a soups video every winter, and every time I like to try at least one soup that I've never had before. So today I'm going to be making borscht. This is a Ukrainian beetroot soup, but it also exists in different countries in Eastern Europe, and I tried to do a lot of research, and it kind of seems like no 2 recipes are the same. This is one of those soups where every family has their own spin on it. A few acquaintances through Instagram actually sent me their family recipes for borscht, so this version is kind of an agglomeration of all of those because I couldn't pick just one. There are quite a few veggies in this soup. I sliced up 1 white onion, and then some recipes call for celery, others don't, so I just added 2 small stalks. And same goes for red pepper. It was in some recipes, but not others, so I added half of a large one. I also peeled 1 large gold potato and cut it into cubes. I thinly sliced a few cups of cabbage. I also saw some recipes that were using a blend of fresh cabbage and sauerkraut, which I thought was interesting. Then I grated 1 carrot. And lastly, I peeled and grated a few small beets. Definitely recommend wearing an apron for this and either using a plate or a tray if you don't want to stain your cutting board. Borscht commonly starts by stewing meat. A few vegetarian versions added beans instead, but I decided to just omit the meat and make it a veggie-based soup. So with the prep out of the way, I'm adding the potatoes and the cabbage to a pot, pouring in enough water to cover them, and I'm using a few beef-style veggie bouillon cubes and a few bay leaves. And then I'm just bringing that mixture up to a boil. So while our potatoes and cabbage are simmering in the back, we're gonna get a new pan and we're going to cook up our beet and veggie mixture. And you'll notice I'm using the stainless steel cookware set from Made In to cook pretty much everything in this video. I've been wanting stainless cookware for so long, and I've pretty much been using this nonstop since I got it, which is why I'm so excited to say that Made In is sponsoring today's video. Made In is used in over 2,000 top-rated restaurants across the country for a reason. They're the real deal. They also partner with multi-generational factories and artisans to ensure that high level of quality in every single pan. These are all made in Italy with a premium 5-ply stainless clad construction, and the 5 layers of metal allow for better heat retention, even heating, and temperature control. I think stainless steel is one of the most versatile cookware materials. It can be used on any kind of cooktop, and it can go straight from the stove to the oven up to 800 degrees. They're also super durable, so if you take good care of these, you could have them in your collection forever. I've already gotten so much use out of this cookware, and I am so excited to be using it for years and years to come. So if you're interested in upgrading your cookware, definitely check out Made In Stainless and all their other products at the link in the description. Right now they're offering some of the best deals of the year, so check it out. Some recipes prepared the entire soup in one pot, but more of them recommended cooking the beets and aromatics separately to help the beets retain their vibrant color. I guess boiling them for a long time can cause the pigment to break down. So I browned the onion slightly and then added in the peppers, celery, and carrot. Then after a few minutes, I added in the beets and cooked until tender. A lot of people recommend adding something acidic like lemon juice or vinegar to this mixture, which can also help preserve that nice bright red color. Some recipes call for the inclusion of tomato to provide that acidity instead. I saw people using fresh tomatoes, some were using tomato paste, some were using tomato sauce, which is what I'm using here. So I'm bringing back my potatoes and cabbage, which are now both tender, and adding a cup of tomato sauce to that. Then I'm adding in my cooked beet and veggie mixture. I also added just a tiny squeeze of lemon. And the very last thing I did was to add in 2 cloves of freshly grated garlic right at the end, just after taking it off the heat. I topped this with some cashew sour cream and fresh dill, and this soup really is so stunning, like actually mesmerizing. It smells incredible. I'm really excited to try this. I love beets, and it's beautiful. I think technically you're supposed to mix the cream in, but I want to try it without mixing it in first. Ready?
I'm so ready.
I feel like this is not going to be a graceful bite. Okay.
Wow. Okay, so my whole thing is that my entire ethnic background is all Eastern European, and I've somehow never had borscht. Like, I've never had a family member or a grandma ever make it, so somehow this is my first time. Oh, the bite with the sour cream. Oh yeah.
I like that it's a little sour. I also thought it was so interesting adding the garlic at the very end because it's giving a very different flavor than what I'm used to when I add it at the beginning.
Right, it's still like a little fresh and more pungent, obviously, than when you cook it for so long. The addition of dill, I mean, we made cabbage rolls a few weeks ago, which is something I have had because people in my family do make that. And it's just, you got that sour and the dill, and it's very Eastern European, and it is just a really good combo. And also beets are amazing. So are we a borscht family now?
I think we are.
I think we are.
I feel like this is a really nourishing soup because it has so many veggies in it, and I'm eager to make it again, trying some of the other variations that I saw. I just love trying recipes from cuisines that I'm not super familiar with. So if you have a soup recipe from your culture that you think I should try out, please let me know. I'm always looking to try new things.
I have a borscht update. My dad said, nobody in my family ever made borscht, so we never made borscht. Which is generally how these things go, right? In a family?
Next up, I'm making congee, which is a rice porridge or a rice soup that has become a staple in our kitchen during the winter. And I'm also going to show you a few of my favorite toppings for it.
When it comes to congee, there are a lot of different methods to make it, and lots of different cultures across Asia have their own version of rice porridge. So for example, I'm half Filipino, and growing up, my Lola would make us arroz caldo, and it's just the most comforting meal. It's especially great when you're sick, or if it's a snow day, you can top it with whatever you want. It's kind of just like a blank slate. My personal favorite recipe that I use every time is the one by Made with Lau, and I really like his method of kind of breaking up the grains so it's the perfect consistency. It has never failed me, so let me show you how we make it.
For our congee base, we are using 8 cups of water to 1 rice cooker cup of rice, which is about 3/4 of a standard cup. Measure out the water and start bringing that up to a boil. I'm using Thai jasmine rice, but I've also made this before with sushi rice and cow rose rice, and those work too. I'm rinsing my rice about 3 times until the water is looking much clearer. We add in the rice once the water has already reached a boil, and this is key. You give it a little stir at the beginning, and then once the pot comes back up to a boil, you don't stir again while it's cooking because that will make it more likely to stick to the bottom of the pot. Let it boil for about 25 minutes on medium heat. Now at this point the rice is tender, but the grains are still intact, so here's where the magic happens. We're gonna vigorously whisk the congee for a few minutes, and this is gonna break up the rice, and it's going to give us this amazing kind of fluffy porridge texture that's really satisfying to eat. Now I'm seasoning with some kosher salt, some chicken-style vegetable bouillon, and some fresh ginger. Stir that through and simmer it for another few minutes to let it thicken a bit more and to let the flavor of the ginger really come through.
This congee is delicious on its own, but when I make it, I usually like to prep a few different toppings to kind of boost the flavor and to make it more of a substantial meal. So let me show you a couple of my favorite components to make to top congee.
Starting off, crispy fried garlic is a must for me. You can actually buy this in big jars at many Asian markets, but I like to make it from scratch. And you're gonna wanna put this stuff on everything, so I recommend doing 2 or 3 whole heads worth at a time. Separate out your cloves, and a quick tip to easily peel them is to soak them in water that's just off a boil for a few minutes. Then the skins just slip right off. Next, you'll either cut the garlic into thin slices, or you can mince it up, whichever you prefer. Then you're gonna add the garlic to a small pot and add enough oil to cover it. I'm using peanut oil. It's my favorite for frying things because it has a really nice neutral flavor and a high smoke point. Just make sure you get regular peanut oil and not the roasted kind, or you can use any kind of frying oil you like. Heat this over medium till it starts to bubble, and then you're gonna let it fry till it's evenly golden brown. Give the garlic a stir every once in a while to help keep it from sticking together. And it's really gonna depend on your stove how long this takes. This batch took me about 12 minutes, but just keep an eye on it, stir it occasionally, and once it's golden brown, you'll strain it through a mesh sieve. Spread the garlic out in one even layer on a paper towel. It will crisp up as it cools. And you can save the garlic oil, but I recommend keeping it in the fridge and try to use it up quickly just for safety. You can do your own investigation there, or you can also freeze it and it will last much longer. The next thing I prepped as a topper for my congee is just some simple pan-fried tofu. I pressed my tofu for about 15 minutes, sliced it up, and I'm frying it in some of that garlicky peanut oil till it's golden brown. I didn't season it much beyond salt because I also always like to make some kind of simple sauce for my congee that's gonna add a ton of flavor. So the tofu doesn't need to be doing too much on its own. Here I'm just using the sauce from my chili garlic silken tofu recipe, which I'll link down below. It's just a mixture of soy sauce, rice vinegar, brown sugar, scallions, and chili crisp. You can also add in some toasted sesame seeds, extra garlic. This time I also added in a handful of roasted peanuts. For some reason, I just really like these in my congee to add some extra texture. Just simmer the sauce for a few minutes till it kind of becomes a little syrupy.
It's finally time to put everything together. We've got our congee. I prepped some fresh scallions and cilantro. Sorry, cilantro soap people. Crispy garlic, fried tofu, and our kind of jammy peanut sauce. This smells so good. Taste test. I'm gonna try to get some of the peanuts, some of the garlic, some of the scallions. Okay. It's really good. It's the perfect amount of ginger too. Amazing. I feel like having something crunchy in there between the garlic and the peanuts is a must for me because it just makes it more interesting. You guys need to make this.
Our next soup is actually one of our all-time favorites. It's my version of the popular broccoli cheddar soup. This one is a real crowd pleaser. It is so creamy and comforting. We're gonna start out with a little bit of prep work, and I always joke that this soup is basically a salad because it really is packed with vegetables. So you'll dice up an onion and a few stalks of celery, and then dice or grate 2 carrots and mince up a few cloves of garlic, or in my case, more than a few cloves of garlic. I use about a pound of potatoes, and I recommend a waxy variety like Yukon Golds because they hold their shape better in soup and they don't disintegrate the way that russet potatoes sometimes can. And I know potato skins are nutritious, but I peel mine because I'm not a fan of the texture, but you can leave yours on. And then we'll chop up a head of broccoli into small florets. Quick tip if you want a little less mess when cutting broccoli, turn it upside down and cut through just the stalk portion, and then you can kind of peel the florets apart and you won't get as many of those tiny little broccoli buds all over your cutting board. Now heat up a few tablespoons of butter or olive oil over medium and add in your onion, celery, and carrot. Saute that for a few minutes till the onions are looking translucent, then add in the garlic and saute for another minute or so. Now we're gonna add in our potatoes and pour in our broth. I'm just using a regular veggie broth from a carton, but sometimes I'll use a chicken-style veggie bouillon cube if I want it to taste a little bit more savory. Bring that up to a boil and then reduce the heat and let it simmer for about 15 minutes or until the potatoes are easy to pierce with a fork. Next, you're gonna take a slotted spoon or a spider and scoop out about half those cooked potatoes into a blender. Some of the other veggies will make their way in too, that's fine, you don't have to be too precise. Set the blender aside for a second and then you're gonna add in the broccoli florets along with some onion powder, garlic powder, smoked paprika, and nutritional yeast. This is going to contribute that cheesy flavor to the dish. It's also loaded with B vitamins and it's got a decent amount of protein, so it's a great ingredient whether you're plant-based or not. We're gonna let that simmer till the broccoli's tender, just a few minutes. And in the meantime, we're gonna blend up those potatoes along with about 3/4 of a cup of raw cashews that I soaked earlier. Cashews are my preferred way to make plant-based soups and sauces thick and creamy. You can also substitute in some raw sunflower seeds, or you could use a block of silken tofu, or even a can of white beans. Blend the potatoes and the soaked cashews along with about half a cup of water until they're as smooth as you can get them. This is the key to that thick and creamy chowder texture. The starch in the potatoes and the fats in the cashews make this ultra velvety mixture that's gonna give a ton of body to our soup. The final addition is just a squeeze of lemon juice to brighten everything up. And here's a quick little bonus recipe for one of my favorite toppers for soups and salads to add some extra flavor and boost the protein. These are our bacony tofu crumbles. I use a super firm, high-protein variety of tofu, and the key is to use a grater to shred the tofu into thin pieces. In my opinion, this works better than just crumbling the tofu by hand because the pieces are flat, so more of it can be in contact with the cooking surface and it'll crisp up better. For the bacon marinade, combine soy sauce, your favorite oil, maple syrup, liquid smoke, onion and garlic powder, paprika, black pepper, and some nutritional yeast. I also add just a skosh of MSG to mine, but that's optional. Add the shredded tofu and toss to coat. You can let that sit and marinate while your oven preheats to 400 degrees. Then you'll add another tablespoon of oil to an unlined metal baking tray, spread it around, and add the tofu. Try to spread that out in a thin, even layer to help it crisp, and then bake it for about 35 to 40 minutes. You'll want to take it out every 10 minutes and give it a thorough mix so it cooks evenly, and each time you'll spread it back out into a thin layer before putting it back in the oven. At the end, the tofu is super crispy, the marinade has caramelized a little bit, and it's perfect to add to soups, salads, or sandwiches, or just to snack on. And now to serve our soup. I recommend topping with some fresh chives or scallions, some tofu crumbles if you like, and look how creamy that is. It is so good. I'm gonna try it on its own first, and then I'll add the tofu bacon bits and try it again. I mean, I've made this so many times. This is one of our most cooked recipes, probably. Maybe our top soup recipe we've made. It just hits every time. It's so creamy. I love a chowdery style soup because it just feels like comfort food. This is a type of soup that I really like to have some crusty bread to dip in it. So I made some no-knead bread, but sourdough would be really good with it too. A little dip. It's so good. Now, I know this doesn't look like much, but it's seriously addictive. We were just eating handfuls of it off of the baking tray. It's just really savory, a little crispy, and it helps to boost the protein. And to wrap up this video, I want to show you this quick and easy way to make my favorite miso soup, plus our current favorite meal to enjoy it with. This recipe comes together super quickly, and the only prep you really need to do is to slice up a couple of scallions, and then I also like to add in some tofu. I'm using silken tofu this time, but medium, firm, extra firm will work fine. Just dice it up into little cubes. Okay, so traditionally, miso starts off with a dashi that's made out of kombu seaweed and bonito flakes, but to make a plant-based version, usually I like to just use this yondu seasoning. This is like an all-purpose umami seasoning sauce that's made out of fermented soybeans and vegetables, and you can use it as like a vegan fish sauce substitute, or you can use it to make a dashi. I just use 1 teaspoon per cup of water. Another alternative for a plant-based dashi is if you have a local Asian market, grab some dried shiitake mushrooms and the kombu seaweed and steep these in cool water for a couple of hours, and it makes a really nice umami base. So I'm adding 4 cups of water and 4 teaspoons of yondu to my pot. You can use another kind of dashi, or in a pinch, you can use regular vegetable broth if you don't mind a little bit of a less traditional flavor profile. If you want your miso to taste like what you'd get at a restaurant, I highly recommend going to your local Asian market and buying some wakame. This is a type of seaweed that's really tasty and super nutritious. It comes dehydrated and it expands quite a bit, so add a little less than you think you need, especially if it's your first time cooking with this. And after a few minutes of simmering, it will rehydrate and look like this. At this point, I also add in the white parts of my scallion and my tofu, and I let those simmer for a few minutes to heat through. I'm using white miso paste, which has a mild and slightly sweet flavor, and this is what I'd recommend buying if you don't cook with miso very often because it's very all-purpose. Not only can you use it in soups, but it can also be added to stir-fries, sauces, really anything to boost the umami and the complexity. I usually add about 1 tablespoon of miso paste per cup of broth. You can reduce the miso a little if your broth is on the saltier side. And miso's fermented. It has live probiotics in it, so it's best to add it at the very end of the cooking process. You don't really want to boil it because it can damage those live cultures and affect the flavor. So we're gonna cut the heat now. And to avoid lumps of miso paste in your soup, you can whisk it in through a mesh sieve like I'm showing here, or you can do the same thing in a ladle. Just try to dissolve the miso paste in a smaller amount of the broth before mixing it in. Just a little bits of Congee. Now all that's left is to add in the scallion greens and the soup is ready to enjoy. You can absolutely make this more of like a filling meal by adding noodles or just serving it with rice, but usually we like to have it as a side when we're making homemade sushi, or in tonight's case, sushi bowls. So we did a little bit of prep work for that earlier. Eric made a batch of, this is kind of supposed to be like a spicy crab salad, but we use shredded tofu instead. We usually use this in vegan California rolls. So this is 1 block of the super firm tofu, and we shred it on a cheese grater. Some vegan mayonnaise, a couple tablespoons of soy sauce, some rice vinegar, as much sriracha as you like, then some sliced scallions, and a little bit of shredded carrot. Just mix it all together, and then we usually like to make this at least an hour ahead of time and pop it in the fridge so it can marinate a little bit. Tastes best that way. Highly recommend trying this if you are missing California rolls because this stuff is addictive. Then we have cucumber, avocado, and rice, and we like to eat our sushi bowls with these roasted seaweed snacks. And with that, our soup journey is coming to a close. If you like more inspiration, you can check out last year's Cozy Soups video where I made pickle soup and lasagna soup, to name a few. And if you wouldn't mind sharing, I would love to know what your current favorite soup is. Subscribe for more plant-based recipes, and happy cooking! I'll see you again soon.